something which could affect any individual. You may have a smaller number of people around you, and yet you may feel extremely connected. And you may be surrounded by thousands of people around you, and you may feel completely disconnected.
The problem is that the addition of the digital aspect has distracted us in feeling there is a connection, whereas there isn't.
You're watching Zen-Brain. Many of you have written in saying that you feel lonely and disconnected from others. This was much before the coronavirus pandemic hit us in 2020. And of course, while on one hand, the pandemic has brought people closer, it's also led to deep isolation and loneliness, among others. So today, let's talk about this pandemic called loneliness. But what exactly does loneliness even mean? Well, the definition is that it is a not so pleasant emotional response that one has to perceived isolation or perceived lack of connection. The important word here being perceived. Alone in the Crowd, Overcoming Loneliness of Urban Living is a book by psychiatrist Dr. Samir Parikh, who's also the director of the Department of Mental Health and Behavioural Sciences at Fortis Healthcare. And the book is co-authored by clinical psychologist Kamna CHHIBBER, who's also completing her PhD. So clearly, they do know what they're talking about. So thank you both for joining me on Zen-Brain, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not always you would have thought that, at least a few decades back, that somebody would have told a person from my fraternity that you know what you're talking about.
Well, I always knew you were talking about the right things, but this time, sorry, Doc, I'm going to have to ask ladies first. So I'm going to have to begin with Kamna. So Kamna, let's talk about the book itself first. What are the three things people should take away from this book?
I think it's very important for us to try and understand that we need to start having some of these really important conversations. And I think loneliness is one aspect that needs to be focused upon. It was something which was there not just during the pandemic, but even prior to the pandemic, which is what prompted us to even write about this entire topic in the book. The thought was there beforehand, and what we have realized and what we really want our readers to be able to take away from the book are a few things. One, that you need to start understanding and acknowledging that loneliness is something which could affect any individual, coming from any segment of society, coming from any sort of a background. You may be an individual who may have a lot of connections, but that does not necessarily mean that you would not feel lonely. So understanding that aspect is very key, because a lot of times people tend to associate that loneliness can only be experienced if you don't have people around you alone. You may have a smaller number of people around you, and yet you may feel extremely connected. And you may be surrounded by thousands of people around you, and you may feel completely disconnected. So I think that's one aspect that we do need to start understanding, that it's not necessarily about the people or the number of people. It's about the quality of the connectedness that you have with people. It's about the quality of connectedness that you have with your own self, which is something which is very important. I think the other aspect also that we really want people to try and understand is that wanting to be alone is something that a lot of people do tend to require for their own selves. They look at it very positively because it comes as a matter of choice. It allows you to have that space for your own individual self where you can think, reflect, introspect, try and work towards your goals, figure out what it is that you need for your own self. And that is something that does not create distress within you, because you make a choice, you value it, it has meaning and importance and relevance in your life. But when we're talking about loneliness, it needs to be distinguished from this aspect of wanting to be alone, to understand that this does not necessarily come from a choice. It creates immense distress for an individual, wherein they seek that connectedness sometimes with their own selves, connectedness sometimes with the outside world, but they're not being able to determine how to go about it, or they're not being able to figure out where does the problem lie. They're not being able to solve it, and that's what creates the kind of impact on individual state of well-being. And I think those two elements are something which are very crucial, which we need people to understand. And the third takeaway, I think, would be more pertaining to the youth, to the young people who feel very connected to the social world, and they believe that being engaged socially across virtual platforms is something which allows them to be able to feel more connected, have the kind of relationships, beat the loneliness that they may experience. But that's not necessarily the case. In fact, more and more younger people in fact talk about feeling and experiencing loneliness, which is where we also become extremely concerned, because we do want people to be able to lead more fulfilling lives, and the youth has so much more life in front of them, and it's so important for them to be able to develop the skills, and which is what we're trying to highlight through the book, that there are some skills which could allow you to be able to tackle this aspect more effectively for your own self.
Fabulously put. I really like what you've talked about, the quality of connectedness rather than just being around people, and connectedness with yourself, very, very important. And the difference between loneliness and being alone. Fabulous points. Thank you very much. Doc, do you want to add to this?
Adding to Kamna Chhibber, that's going to be a tough one.
Very tough.
Seeking solitude because of spending the kind of busy routines that we have is a choice all of us need to make as a part of self-care. It instills positivity. Feeling isolated or lonely, which means I would want to be with someone, but I don't have anybody significant who is truly connected to me, makes me feel lonely, which instills negativity. And that differentiator one needs to understand. The one bit that Kamna talked about, social media, is very important. Yes, for young people, but I think increasingly for a wider spectrum of the population. Liking, forwarding, maybe time consuming, which basically means it consumes your time. So because you were in that moment doing that and kept yourself distracted from other feelings, does not mean those feelings won't happen or don't come to you or don't exist. And nobody can be occupied in their mind or in their routine 24/7. It's not possible. So the moment you would have that little bit of dip or a little bit of joy, and then when you realize you don't have somebody to share with or to take a break, all these scrollings and likings and forwards lose their meaning. And that's what one needs to understand, that alone in the crowd, in a way, it's not possible. In urban spaces, we struggle to find privacy, yet we find loneliness. Think about that.
It's a paradox. And as you mentioned, isn't it ironic that in an age of technology, social media, you're talking about perceived social connectedness of people online, this so-called pandemic of loneliness is more apparent in youngsters now more than ever. And so what are some specific measures that you recommend? And I'll throw it open to the both of you. Maybe we can begin with you, Doc, to try and overcome this feeling of loneliness. What are some of the things that you recommend?
So when I had gone to medical college, right, now this is 1990, nearly most of you were not born by that time, right? Now what happens is that we did not have mobile phones at that time. For me to talk home, it would be a bit of a walk to those lovely PCOs where you will stand in line because lots of other students would be there. The cost ticker, you've talked 2 minutes and so many rupees, so many paise, and that continues, that would happen. And for most others, it would be writing a letter. So you would write a letter, go and post it. It reaches in a couple of days. Then they read it, write, reply. That was that time. If somebody would have told me at that time that, this time would happen where I can do a video call with the very cousin, I would be writing a letter twice a week and getting a response, and which would be a driving force for me because I was away from home as a medical student in a new city. So all those aspects that young people struggle from today, away from home, new place, not with your friends, not with your family, pressure of performance, pressure of results, so much to do. And in that, it was the meaningful relationships that were making one go. maintain positivity.
Hmm.
What's happened now is that the depth of that meaningful relationship has been lost, even though access has become so easy.
Absolutely.
And that is where the concerns are. And that's where the solution also is. Is it actually going to be some absolutely rubbish forwards and some what they're called memes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, come on, get creative. There's so much more than just picking up somebody's picture and picking up a dialogue somewhere else and just putting the two together and then claiming to be funny. There's a lot more in the world.
Yeah.
How about using the same energy to talk to your best friend, a cousin, your own family member?
First of all, thank you for underestimating my age. Really appreciate it. Let's move to Kamna, who's clearly the youngest. Let me ask you, as a clinical psychologist, instant gratification that we talk about, commodification of life, everything available at the click of a button, even friends, partners, easily available on apps and social media. It all comes at a cost, doesn't it? The cost of your mind space. And in this I, me, myself culture, would you say people have become more egocentric and selfish and therefore lonely? Secondly, that people seem to expect more than they give.
I would say that there's a lot of truth to it as well, but I think somewhere it's also reflective of the kind of culture that is coming about at this point in time. Like Dr. Parikh was saying, that there is so much more that is there that we can seek and do, but how do you seek that out unless you're going to be able to find the time and the space to be able to slow down, pause, reflect, introspect? And like you said, that we are in a society right now which cherishes instant gratification. You want everything at the click of a button. You don't want to spend the kind of time that would be required to get into a space where you can understand for your own self what you truly require, what your needs are, and how those needs can actually be separated from your desires. And those desires may very well be coming from a very limited understanding of what is truly important to you, but may well be just picked up from what you see the outside world, your friends, your peers, some other people, role models, anyone giving that value. And you believe that is what you seek. And I think somewhere it's this inability to be able to take that step back and to feel that it's okay for me to change the pace at which I'm doing things so that I can actually figure out for my own self what would bring greater meaning and value into my life, which prevents us from being able to develop a life where we would feel greater sense of contentment and would be able to truly immerse ourselves into the experiences that hold more meaning and value for us. And that is something which is so essential that young people in particular, in fact, like Dr. Parikh said, it's no longer a problem that's only for the young, it's for perhaps everyone around us, that we do need to start figuring out ways to be able to slow down, pause, and start reflecting and introspecting. We need to start accepting the fact that we will go through difficult experiences, we will have difficult emotions that we need to process, and we don't need to run away from them. The need to deny the fact that I can have a problem, that I can have a difficult experience, is something that we need to start letting go of. The need to distance ourselves from things which can be hard to process is something that we need to start letting go of. And it's so important for us to start engaging with these things. And when you start engaging in some of these aspects, you realize that you need to start investing time. And that time is going to be your contribution to that situation, which requires us to shift from a thought process where we are constantly trying to take. That shift is something which is very, very important. In fact, it reminds me of an instance where my uncle was narrating an instance about my grandfather to me. And he said that, the one thing that he always said was that in your relationships, you should be the giver.
So right.
That thought process, I don't think necessarily permeates into the mind space of a lot of people today, because you're constantly looking at what am I going to get here? It's become very transactional. So if I am doing something here, what is coming to me? I'm looking at that, but I'm not willing to necessarily say, I'm still going to go ahead and do this because it makes me feel good. And I am okay doing this even if I don't get anything in return. That kind of selflessness towards our actions has somewhere gone missing. And I think that is what creates that perception within our minds that we are all becoming selfish, egocentric, more self-absorbed. But it's about learning to become givers in the true sense, which could really change the entire fabric of the relationships that we have around us and the ways in which we are engaging with people around us.
Some element of transactional component will always be there. The problem is that one, you need to differentiate between meaningful relationships that matter to you and various acquaintances that you have as a part of life. And then you need to now also add a component of your virtual digital. I don't like to use the word connect, but since connections is the more popular terminology used, so even though it's disconnected connections that we call as connections which stay disconnected, so that's a very just strange, but that's how it is. So what happens is, now where is your attention, energy, and priority going? Now, the middle component, which is acquaintances, is where most of your transactions are happening, because some of them happen in the not so personal space or not so intimate space, which takes a lot out of you. But that's also what you need to do, because you need to take care of yourselves, your family, your loved ones, your life, so on and so forth. The problem is that the addition of the digital aspect has distracted us in feeling there is a connection, whereas there isn't. You sometimes don't know how many minutes to hours you take to read or just keep scrolling. You want to use symbols instead of words. So if you are going to be lost here, you won't have time left for the meaningful interactions, meaningful relationships. You don't invest in meaningful relationships, you'll feel lonely, directly proportional, can't do anything about it. And if COVID can't give us any other learning, then surely COVID has given us this learning, that how important are meaningful relationships. If you needed help, whom did you call? Who was it that went out of the way to give you support, food, meds, find a bed for you, do some other aspect? Who were those people? Now reflect on the fact how much time, energy you've given to these people vis-a-vis all the other aspects of your life. That's the problem. I've interacted with hundreds of people over the last 2 years who've been directly or indirectly impacted by COVID. And I'm telling this to you very clearly. People who had good support, positive support system, their outcomes were remarkably different than those who struggled for support system. So you invest into that, and this applies to everybody. Families, RWAs, extended family, workplaces, meaningful relationships. Emotion has to be there. So your, as you again don't like to use some of these terms, but your avatar or what you've put there, what color you want, what hair do you want, what glasses you want, doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. What matters is, do you have somebody who can pick up a call and say, okay, let's have a cup of tea together? He had a bad day, want to talk, or had a brilliant day, need to really share with you, or just sit and do nothing with somebody or your own self. Maybe listen to some music because you like it, not because you are so habituated to switch on a radio channel or something while you are driving where you have no clue what you are listening to. Something that we've talked about in the book, Mindful Urban Living. Absolutely. How mindful are you of your living? If you are mindful, you won't be lonely, because you'll also recognize your distress, your need to reach out, need to connect in the true sense. And that's how the world plays with words. You use connections. You use words like followers. You use words like influencers. The words have meaning, but it's all unreal. So you may have hundreds and hundreds of connections or followers. They sure aren't following you, and they are not connected as well.
Very crucial points that you've brought out: meaningful relationships and mindful living. You have an entire chapter of the book dedicated to the changing landscape of relationships. What, according to you, Kamna, would be 3 things that someone who comes to you for help can do to improve their relationship and interaction with others in order to avoid feeling this sense of loneliness?
When you're looking at relationships, they need to be reciprocal. So as much as you're looking to share with people, and that is something we absolutely encourage. We tell people that if you are going through an experience in your life, be open enough to talk about it. Share what it is that you're going through. People around you will never magically come to understand that you may be struggling or you may be having a difficult situation which is going on in your life, something which you are finding challenging in coping with. So it's something which is very, very essential, that you need to start becoming okay with sharing what your experiences are, letting go of that hesitation. But while we also talk about this aspect, we also tell people that you need to be open to listening as well. Don't be in a rush to tell them that, okay, either their experience is something that happens to everyone, or that, why are you thinking like this? You should not be thinking like this, or you should not be feeling this. Just try to hear them out. A lot of times you may not be able to identify with the experience of the other person, but when you are just listening to them, you will give them that space where they can feel that, this is something, or this relationship is something which is really important to me. This person understands me, and I am here in this space where I can rely on this person. And that is what brings people together, creates the right kind of connections that we've been talking about, the meaningful relationships. And start investing the kind of time that you are otherwise probably just splurging in random activities of your life, which will do nothing for you, contribute nothing significant to you. Instead, take that time and invest it in your relationships. Like Dr. Parikh spoke in the beginning, pick up the phone, call that important person in your life, your friend, your family, your relative, a colleague, whoever it is, who you think holds importance for you. Reach out for them and don't wait to see whether they are doing that for you or not. Invest that kind of time. These 3 things, if we start prioritizing, you can change the landscape of your relationships.
Emotional reciprocity, not reciprocity. Hey, I'm going to watch this film. Do you also want to watch this film? Or I'm ordering Chinese. Would you want Thai? But by the way, any one of you is planning to ask me, it'll have to be Gujarati food, and I really can't, unless it's a Chinese make Gujarati style, that'll work for me. It's emotional reciprocity. You will realize when you talked about relationships, so many people who come to us who had stronger starts, strong blueprints, and significant friends and peer support, and who later on start struggling in their relationships, is primarily because of this. That the acts they were doing together or being so-called engaged to, vis-a-vis the emotional reciprocity that they had, these started going apart until you started feeling isolated in the very relationship. So emotional reciprocity in relationships.
That sort of takes effort, and what I think mindful living that you talked about really gets into is investing emotions in every relationship, even at the workplace. Since we're talking about the workplace, Shackled to the Desk is another chapter in your book, which tackles the target-driven, highly competitive, high-stress work culture that we seem to have normalized completely, right? Where we celebrate people who work long hours instead of celebrating those who lead a balanced life. So my first question is, has workplace stress enabled more loneliness? And secondly, has this stress plus loneliness put people at greater risk of mental health issues like depression?
I was born in the 70s. So all this, doing too many things and how much more you work, that's for this Kamna Chhibber, this generation. Kamna Chhibber will answer that. I'll come back on the mental illness part. But Kamna, since you guys have to do so many things, have so many profiles, have so many to do things. Oh, there's a new joint opened up, I must see it. Oh, I must also click my picture having a food there. Array, you are having your food, just eat it. What's there to click on it? But no, you will do that also. Oh, I forgot to send you a heart on a birthday, or an emoticon that I missed. Oh, you didn't miss my emoticon. You did not like this. You did not like that. And you also need the best of this. Oh, this is now trending in. Have you not picked this up? And this is available. This is the new thing in. And then you also have to work, and you also want a very, very good vehicle, which you would never drive in any case. Yeah. And then you would also want to go here and go there and want everything possible in the very 24 hours and also want to sleep, and then you're sleeping when you shouldn't be. So I think this question is for your generation.
That's a good excuse, but Kamna, come on, counter that.
I think workplaces can create stress and pressure. Yes, we know that it can. But organizations and individuals within organizations can do so much more to ameliorate it as well, is also a reality. It's every individual's responsibility to try and ensure that they can create the right kind of balance for their own self. And that balance is going to vary from individual to individual. So someone may need breaks through the day, an individual may require a big break in the middle of the day, and someone may require just breaks on the weekends and they would like to keep a packed week otherwise. And everyone's needs can be very different, and we need to start becoming more aware of what our individual requirements are and what could be the best way to fit the kind of roles and responsibilities that we have around those needs to make sure that we can live the best life that we do desire. And Dr. Parikh is right that we want to do everything possible in a short span of time. So you're almost feeling like you're running this race where you're constantly trying to catch up with a million different things which you're seeing around you, and which is why we talk about urban mindful living. Because mindful living is what will allow you to be able to understand the relative value and importance of these million things that you think you need to do, where you can start making better choices for your own self, and you learn how to be in the moment when you are doing an activity, when you're engaged with something, whether it is related to your work or otherwise. You need to be immersed in that experience to be able to ensure that you're able to derive your full emotional, psychological experience out of that situation. It's very, very critical that you do that. And it's something which is very essential. We need to focus on this part to ensure that we can take care of the levels of stress that we experience, and we are being able to cope more effectively by making better choices and not feeling like we need to run after these million things around us.
I'll give you an example of mindful urban living. Something as simple as making a cup of tea. Now you have a choice of just going and making a cup of tea. You are hearing the sound, smelling it, you are pouring it, you are sipping it. But now imagine while you are making the tea, you're also on the phone or texting someone, checking something else, letting some television also go on, also doing some three other things, and then you let it boil, run, do one more task, come back. Even that 5, 7, 10 minute break that your mind was seeking and getting, which could have been a positive feeling for yourself, you miss out on it. More human errors happen because you were not focused enough. Most accidents happen because you were looking or doing something else. And this is what one needs to understand. We all have multiple roles in our life, which is okay. You don't need to do multiple tasks at the same time, even though we all do multiple tasks during the course of the day. That's something we need to understand. It's something as simple as, try watering plants a bit, spend some time with pets, listen to some music, read, but don't do three things together. I'll watch my favorite show and read a book and also listen to music, Kamna CHHIBBER style. That doesn't work. You do it more my style. Do one thing, chill, relax. It's okay. Nothing's going on anywhere. And if you switch off your cell, which I do switch off my cell in the evening, and both of you know that, the world stays right there. You aren't that important that just because you switched off your cell, the world will go crumbling over itself. Next day morning, will be right there where you've left it. Be a bit relaxed and spend time in things that matter.
Now, the second part of the question, Doc, has this stress plus loneliness put people at greater risk of mental health issues?
I think the right way to look at this would be that anything which increases our sense of distress, anything which gives us chronic stress, is bound to have an impact on our physical and mental health. It will affect our immunity, it will affect our resistance. That's there. To say that something would be directly correlated right now, to say that if you are feeling lonely, it will be directly related to a particular mental illness, I don't think we are there. Because intensity, duration, other circumstances, there are too many variables. At the same time, if you are suffering from a chronic illness, a mental ailment, or any other ailment, you are more predisposed towards experiencing loneliness because of how your nature of support system is, how your level of illness is, and the interface you have. So that aspect one would need to understand, especially when we talk about loneliness and chronic illnesses, which don't need to be mental ailments alone. It may apply to most other illnesses as well. The fact that we talk about urban loneliness a lot more is because it is a lot more prevalent. And why don't we talk about the connected rural populations aspects around loneliness? Is because the true sense of connectedness between this small group of people and families who are living in a certain geographical area that keeps them engaged with each other, where neighbors actually matter, and neighbors are not merely with whom you're going to fight over a car parking spot, right? Neighbors in the true sense, and there may be a 100-meter walk as well. Now, from there to urban spaces, where until COVID happened, a lot of people in densely populated high rises didn't know who their next door neighbors were or somebody a floor. It's about family, friends, neighbors, workplace, any other meaningful relationship that you've been able to develop, harness it, cherish it, keep working on it. That's the way to look at life. And while you do that, have enough time for your own self as well. Like Kamna earlier said, be different people, different personalities. You would want time for your own self in a different way, which is quite okay. There isn't a rule of the thumb that everybody needs to have X many hours free time or do this or do that. You figure out, we're all individuals, unique individuals. What may work for me may not work for you. But are you taking time out consciously for what works for you? And understand, if nothing else, it's going to give you both personal accomplishment, professional success.
Absolutely, Doc. And the reason why I asked you the connection with mental health issues is, even with loneliness, when is it time to worry?
If you are feeling lonely, then you need to introspect and see when, how soon you start engaging with people with whom you can connect and then invest time. You don't wait, because there isn't a time frame here. If you have felt lonely today, the odds are, if you do nothing about it, you will feel lonely in a couple of days again. Today, what was a fleeting few second, few minute experience, tomorrow will be a few hours, it could then be few days. And if you continuously feel it, meaningfulness and purposefulness of life would start diluting, and you'll struggle as an individual in life, from joy to sadness to fear to anxiety to anger, whatever you did. It would be an incomplete experience in absence of somebody to share with.
Because at the end of the day, we are social beings, and we mustn't lose track of that. Kamna, would you like to add to what Doc has just said?
I think Dr. Parikh covered it all. There isn't much more
As
to
always.
that.
As
always.
That's a tough one.
So let me ask you specifically now 3 things as a clinical psychologist that somebody with deep work stress can do immediately to ease that stress. Because would you agree that deep stress is accompanied by deep loneliness as well?
It can certainly
And
be.
what
And
you
yes,
would also implement in your own life, Kamna. Yeah, good.
we'll keep that separate. But looking at what could be 3 quick things that people can do, which would sound easy, but they're actually difficult to implement, but I think are very, very critical. One, you need to try and talk to someone who's within your organization, preferably your manager or someone who is at a senior level, who can actually help you figure out where are you going wrong, what could you do differently, and what is it that the system can do in order to support you. You may feel isolated in your experience a lot of the times, but when you start talking to people around you, you start beginning to look at solutions. Otherwise, you tend to develop a tunnel vision in most situations where you're getting stuck with the same thought process. So I think that would be one thing. It's very difficult a lot of times because you don't know how the other person is going to respond or react, but try it. It could really give you a lot of good understanding and points about what you can do to take care of it. I think the second part is that we also need to try and draw certain boundaries around ourselves. It becomes difficult. You feel that there's a lot of pressure. You need to reach a certain goal, and you feel that if you start refusing to do something, or if you will say that I need more time for something, that it would be a negative aspect which would reflect on you in a very bad way on your job overall. But a lot of times, I think it's very important to be able to have that conversation, to be able to say that this is something which is difficult for me. Seeking that help and support can go a long way in helping you take care of that stress, because if nothing else, you may realize that someone else in that same situation could have also experienced the same thing. So you may not be experiencing this on your own, and that in itself can be a very big thing. And I think the third aspect is figure out a frequency of breaks that works for you. You may need that during the course of your workday as well. You may need it at the end of the workday, in the middle at some point in time. Become okay with taking those breaks. Figure out if you need every couple of hours, you need to take 5 minutes off, 10 minutes off, just switch off, allow yourself to just, decompress a little, get up, go get yourself a cup of water, go use the restroom, come back. But disengage from that work thought and from that work talk for those 5 or 10 minutes so that you can switch off and then switch on again. I think these three things could certainly be tried.
See, Dr. Parikh, she needs to get into social media to be able to switch off from the work that she does. And I hope you're listening, because she talked about boundaries.
That is so not true. We are doing this recording at 7:30 p.m. only because that was the only slot Kamna Chhibber gave. Right? When you sent me the message, I actually sent her the message. What time would work for you? She gave me 2 slots. I will tell you those 2 slots. Either between 8 to 9 a.m. or at 7:30 p.m. I said, fine, I will talk to Shruti and get back to you. And then I message you, can we do it late evening? This isn't me. I would have said, fine, fix up a day, we'll just do it, no issues, I'll manage it. So this is not true. But I must say that after a lot of effort, Kamna is trying to bring in a few changes. I decided to paint a little bit. And for a change, while painting, would switch off her cell. Has continued reading. It's just that our next book is supposed to be out very soon. It's just that we haven't started reading. So, Rupa, you are listening, just too much to do. And enough mindful living was not happening with Kamna. So, whereas all the thoughts are there, she just needs to put in some words so that we can again put in some words. The book is already in our heads. We're just running a couple of months late on our deadline. And yes, now that Kamna has started a bit of, what is that thing called? That Chakki pe kya hote ho?
Pottery.
Yeah. So some of that, and all said and done, if you and the most mindful aspect of Kamna's living is eating. I never understand what these people order. Never understand. Every time it's a new word which I have no clue about. It just looks, they call it pretty. I just feel that it's not even feeling complete, because where's the whole Gujarati thali? Right? So it's something here and something there. But yeah, so not that she is not shy, but a lot of you need to, all of us need to understand that life is a longitudinal axis. And even though at a certain longitudinal axis or moments of your life, especially in your young adulthood, you may feel that you'll have more energy than a marathon runner. Remember, most marathon runners don't do more than 2, maybe 3 races plus minus a year, because that's the time, energy that goes in it, and the body needs to recuperate. Same applies to all of us. And you don't always need to be running behind something, and numbers and targets are just one part of life. The numbers and Excels and P&Ls and EBITDAs are important, but not life.
Well, the next time we're going to meet up over a Gujarati thali for sure, right? Kamna and myself are going to take you out. All right.
Perfect. A Gujarati thali. Perfect.
Before I wind up, though, I have to ask the both of you, since you've written the book, have you both experienced periods of loneliness, and how have you tackled it, if you have at all?
It would be difficult to say that one would not have felt any emotion at any given moment in your lifetime. I don't think that's possible. But to be honest, for me to say that I would have experienced regular bouts or sustained aspects of loneliness, not really. There have always been friends, an absolutely strong pillar of family. When I say family, there are so many subparts to the family. Like I said, born in 70s. So I have a family that lives with me, a family that's connected. Otherwise, a family that's with the school alumni, family that's college friends. Call it old school, call it mental health professional, whichever way. For me, work colleagues continue to be, family. And if you have people whom you care about, who care about you, who with whom you like being, then the odds of your experiencing loneliness is going to be less. Existentialism will hit us every now and then. It will redefine us, give us power if we have the right energies when it comes to our own selves, but also support system. We are nothing if we are not us. And I is not good enough. It's we that matters.
If I have to speak for myself, I think the only periods of loneliness that I ever felt was in my adolescent years, or maybe early 20s, when all we did was work, work, work. But I'll leave the last word with you, Kamna. So why don't you tell us how you've handled, if at all, any periods of loneliness?
Like Dr. Parikh was also saying, that perhaps never experienced those sustained periods of loneliness, but there have been moments where one would have experienced some sort of an emotion which was difficult in its own way. And in those moments, I think what has always been the biggest source of support has been the support system. Friends, family, work people. In my case, work people have been truly family as well. And those support systems coming together has always been the biggest aspect to ensure that, my well-being is taken care of. And at the same time, what has also really been helpful is to be able to determine over a period of years what it is that really makes me feel connected to my own self. So whether it has been writing, whether it's been reading, whether it's been painting, food, all of those pieces do come together in their own way. They allow me to be able to connect to my own self and to be able to take care of my own self in a way. And these two elements together are what have been strong pillars around which life has revolved.
Well, the attraction of an aspirational life filled with great expectations, a flamboyant lifestyle, enormous quantities of junk food, deep stress, coupled with a sedentary life, one would have thought that the coronavirus pandemic would have given us some perspective that we have to make a change. But exercising to feel good and live a healthy life is daily practice. Building a support system, as both Dr. Parikh and Kamna have talked about, is practice. Mindful living is a practice. Eating nutritious food is daily practice. Being happy with yourself is daily practice. Everything that we do daily will define who we ultimately become. Alone in the Crowd, Overcoming Loneliness of Urban Living by Dr. SAMIR PARIKH and clinical psychologist KAMNA CHHIBBER. Kindle edition and paperback is available on Amazon. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me on Zen-Brain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's my good ball.